Britain's local roads are buckling under modern freight traffic. Most of that infrastructure was built long before 2001, when the government raised the legal weight limit for heavy goods vehicles to 44 tons to match European standards. Roads, roundabouts, and bridges that were never structurally upgraded suddenly had to carry vehicles they were never designed to handle. Today, over 200,000 trucks use that same network every single day. Local councils are spending billions every year on repairs that engineers openly admit are fixing surface damage rather than the structural problem underneath. The haulage industry calls that progress. The 2 million people living along Britain's busiest freight corridors call it something else entirely. To understand how we got here, we need to go back to when these regulations were written. In 1964, Britain set the maximum weight limit for heavy goods vehicles at 32 tons. The roads were smaller then. The M25 didn't exist. The logistics network was vastly different, and a significant portion of heavy freight still moved by rail. But as the economy globalized, so did the demands on our transport network. By 1983, haulage companies pushed the government to raise the limit to 38 tons to stay competitive. In 1999, 44-ton trucks were permitted, but strictly for combined road and rail transport. Finally, in February 2001, the government opened the floodgates, allowing a general 44-ton limit for six-axle articulated trucks across all roads. The core issue is one of basic engineering. When they increased the weight limits to 44 tons, they did not fundamentally upgrade the infrastructure to match. The exact same local roads, roundabouts, and bridges that struggled with 32-ton trucks in the 1960s are now expected to handle vehicles nearly 40% heavier. The science behind road damage is ruthless. Civil engineers use something called the fourth power law. This principle states that the damage caused to a road surface increases exponentially by the fourth power of the axle weight. In simple terms, a truck axle carrying 10 tons causes roughly 10,000 times more damage to the subbase of a road than a car axle carrying 1 ton. Take the A34 through Oxfordshire. This major route carries thousands of these 44-ton monsters every single day, but it was designed decades ago for much lighter, less frequent traffic. The constant, repetitive pounding from heavy axles shatters the structural integrity of the tarmac, allowing water to seep in, freeze, and blow the road apart from the inside out. This is creating deep, dangerous potholes faster than local councils can deploy repair crews. In some sections of the British road network, the surface is being completely milled and replaced every 3 years instead of the expected 10 to 15. The national cost is staggering. Local authorities spend over £2 billion annually repairing damage caused primarily by heavy goods vehicles. But here is the financial twist. The vehicle excise duty and road levies these trucks pay do not come close to covering that massive repair bill. The shortfall comes directly from general taxation, meaning every single car driver and taxpayer in Britain is heavily subsidising the destruction of roads they are not ruining. But the financial impact is just the beginning. These trucks are creating safety hazards that the current infrastructure simply cannot mitigate. Consider the raw physics. A fully loaded 44-ton truck travelling at 60 miles per hour carries a terrifying amount of kinetic energy. According to the Highway Code and official DVSA testing, under optimal conditions, a vehicle of this size needs roughly 90 to 110 meters to stop completely. On a wet motorway, or with slightly worn brake pads, that stopping distance balloons significantly. Most British motorway slip roads, rural intersections, and urban crossings were never designed with these massive stopping distances in mind. The crash data tells a disturbing story. According to road safety charities like Brake and reports from the Department for Transport, heavy goods vehicles are disproportionately involved in fatal collisions. When a passenger car collides with an HGV, the fatality rate is fundamentally skewed, often cited as up to 8 times higher than a standard car-to-car accident due to the immense weight disparity. But these statistics are often buried deep in annual reports. The official response usually focuses on general driver error and speeding, rather than acknowledging the fundamental, deadly mismatch between vehicle weight and outdated road design. Even more concerning, is what happens when these vehicles leave the motorway network. Many of Britain's historic market towns were built centuries before the internal combustion engine existed. Their narrow streets, tight corners, and ancient stone bridges were never meant to handle modern traffic, let alone 44-ton behemoths. In the Cotswolds village of Chipping Norton, the A44 runs right through the centre of town. Residents have been campaigning for years to restrict heavy goods vehicles from the high street. The medieval, listed buildings literally shake when the trucks pass. The road surface is a patchwork of cracked asphalt and sunken drains. But the haulage companies claim they have no economically viable alternative routes, and the government has consistently refused to fund a bypass. The exact same story is playing out across rural Britain. Villages that were once quiet havens are now thundering with massive diesel engines, 24 hours a day. Historic bridges, originally engineered for horse-drawn carts and light agricultural traffic, are groaning under the weight of vehicles that would have been completely incomprehensible to the people who built them. Local councils are trapped in a nightmare scenario. They cannot legally ban the trucks because the regional economy and local supermarkets depend on just-in-time freight transport. But they absolutely cannot afford to reinforce every B road and rural bridge to comfortably handle 44 tons. So, they are stuck in an endless, expensive cycle of emergency patching while their infrastructure slowly crumbles into dust. The environmental cost is equally concerning. While modern Euro 6 engines have done a remarkable job of cleaning up exhaust fumes compared to the black smoke of the past, older, non-compliant diesel trucks, still operating on the fringes, can produce the smog-forming pollution equivalent of dozens of cars. But tailpipe emissions are only half the story. The sheer, crushing weight of a 44-ton vehicle causes massive accelerated tyre and brake wear. Every time one of these trucks accelerates, turns, or hits the brakes, it sheds highly toxic PM 2.5 particulate matter directly into the air and local waterways. In dense urban areas and enclosed valleys, these microscopic particles are significant contributors to air quality crises, linked to asthma, heart disease, and thousands of premature deaths annually. Yet, official statistics rarely isolate the environmental impact by weight class. Heavy goods vehicles are often lumped into broad categories, obscuring the true, localized impact of the heaviest fleets. Environmental groups have been demanding separate, transparent data on 44-ton tyre degradation for years, but the regulatory bodies lag far behind the science. The noise pollution is another factor that is systematically ignored. These massive engines, combined with the percussive sound of 6 axles hitting damaged road surfaces and potholes, create noise levels that consistently exceed World Health Organization guidelines. Studies strictly link chronic traffic noise to disrupted sleep, increased rates of heart disease, stroke, and severe mental health problems. Yet when residents complain about their windows rattling at 3 a.m., they are often told it is simply the unavoidable price of economic progress. Perhaps most shocking is what the industry itself admits behind closed doors. Internal documents from major logistics companies, revealed through whistleblowers and freedom of information requests, show that some operators routinely push the boundaries of even the 44-ton limit. The UK's enforcement system is riddled with massive blind spots. There are only a limited number of active weighbridges on British roads, and experienced drivers communicate to easily avoid them by taking rural alternative routes. Furthermore, the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, or DVSA, is chronically under-resourced. When vehicles are actually caught overweight, the fines levied by the courts are often so incredibly small that aggressive companies treat them as a minor operational tax rather than a serious legal deterrent. One leaked internal memo from a major logistics firm previously instructed depot managers to load specific vehicles up to 46 or 47 tons. The cold corporate calculation was simple. Even with occasional fines, the extra revenue generated from the increased cargo capacity would more than cover the financial penalties. The memo coldly noted that criminal prosecution was rare and that most minor overweight violations resulted in nothing more than a delayed journey and a slap on the wrist. This systematic overloading means that the actual weight of trucks tearing up British tarmac is often significantly higher than the legal maximum. Roads engineered to their absolute limits at 44 tons are being covertly pounded by vehicles weighing 50 tons or more. The hyper-accelerated damage this causes is almost never attributed to illegal overloading, simply because the authorities do not have the manpower or technology to constantly monitor compliance across the entire grid. The economic arguments used to justify these massive weight limits also begin to fall apart when scrutinized. The haulage industry consistently claims that heavier trucks reduce the total number of journeys needed, thereby cutting overall costs and emissions. But this convenient equation completely ignores the external costs imposed on society. When you properly factor in the £2 billion road damage, the elevated safety risks, the PM 2.5 pollution, and the degraded quality of life for communities forced to live on major freight arteries, the true hidden cost of 44-ton vehicles is astronomical. These external costs are effectively subsidized by ordinary taxpayers who receive none of the direct profits. International comparisons reveal exactly how out of step Britain has become with sustainable transport. Many European countries have invested heavily and consistently in rail freight networks, specifically to keep the heaviest, most destructive cargo off their roads. Look at Switzerland. The Swiss move an impressive 35 to 40% of their transalpine freight by rail. Germany moves roughly 18 to 20%. The UK lags far behind, sitting at a dismal 9 to 11%. Switzerland achieved this not by accident, by heavily investing in massive engineering projects like the Gotthard Base Tunnel, and by implementing a strict heavy vehicle fee, or LSVA, that charges trucks based on their weight, emissions, and the distance they travel. The environmental targets that the government has legally committed to make the current system entirely unsustainable. Achieving net zero emissions by 2050 will require a fundamental, aggressive shift away from diesel-powered road freight. But instead of accelerating this transition, policymakers continue to increase the physical burden on a road network that is already in critical condition. While European nations pioneer clean, electric, and hydrogen trucks, Britain remains locked into an increasingly damaging and unsustainable system. The human cost of this failed policy is measured in fractured communities and degraded infrastructure. Every massive pothole represents taxpayer money diverted from hospitals. Every historic building damaged by deep diesel vibrations is an irreplaceable piece of heritage lost. Proven solutions exist, but implementing them requires a massive shift in political will to admit the current system is fundamentally broken. The 44-ton truck represents everything wrong with modern British transport policy, short-term economic thinking, and regulatory capture. The result is a system that socializes the massive costs of road repair while privatizing the logistical benefits. Until true costs are properly accounted for through weight-based tolling and rail investment, Britain will continue to sacrifice its roads and environment. The next time you are stuck behind a 44-ton truck, remember you are not just witnessing heavy traffic, you are seeing the highly visible symbol of a transport system that prioritizes short-term logistical profits over long-term national sustainability, costing every single one of us far more than we realize.